Okay, Dustin, we were on the podcast the other day and you brought up the 20-60-20, and I think this is a principle that a lot of business leaders need to hear about. Let's break it down.
Yeah, for sure. So I think, one of the interesting things, if we look at what is really the 20-60-20, right? So if your sales team consists of 100%, right? You have 20% that are underperformers, you have 20% that are the top performers, and then you have the 60% in the middle. So that's kind of your breakout of, and it's amazing on how true that is, right? We go into so many different organizations and I've seen so many different sales teams, and that it always seems to ring true. And so if this, really kind of is an extension of the Pareto principle, right? The Pareto principle says that 20% of your inputs can drive 80% of your results, right? Well, in a sales team, oftentimes your top 20% of your sales team is generating close to 80% of your results. The flip of that is your bottom 20% is often taking up 80% of your time, energy, and expense, right? Because they're the underperformers. And so you have this dichotomy of these bottom 20% that aren't getting the results, but yet that's where the huge time, energy, and expense is. And then you have your top 20% that is really driving the results, and it gets out of whack. And so what we've seen so many times with organizations, and specifically sales leaders, is where are they spending their time? It's the sales leader's trap, right? To focus on the bottom 20%, right? Because they're trying to coach them up or coach them out, right? Or maybe just coaching them up, which they really should be maybe coaching them out. And they oftentimes will ignore the top 20% because they're your top performers. They already got it figured out, right? Now, don't get me wrong. A lot of times the top 20%, they probably don't need a lot of training and support and guidance and things like that. But first of all, they're the most likely to be recruited, so you want to spend time with them. But two, they're also the ones that can help you continue to accelerate, right? So how do we continue to free them up to accelerate faster? But really, the amazing thing to me is where the huge opportunity is for most sales organizations is that bottom 20%. We just have to make a decision on those people, right? So many of them are, kind of in this middle fork of the road where they're saying, well, they're all C players. The secret is they're not, right? There's a lot of them that might be masquerading as C players, but there's probably a lot of F players that are masquerading as C players, and someone just needs to make a decision. And by the way, those people are probably not happy themselves, right? This isn't, about being disingenuous. They're probably suffering. They're probably not enjoying their job because no one wants to not be successful.
It could be a bad fit.
Exactly right. But that middle 60% is where there's so much freaking potential. And the reason being is because those middle 60%, most of them probably shouldn't be coached out, right? Most of them probably have the potential to elevate. But because they're the middle 60%, they get zero of the time, right? They get absolutely none or very little. And the reason being is because what is the sales leader or business leader, where are they spending their time? They're focusing on the low performers to basically say like, we got to train them up or train them out. They're focusing on the top people because they're the ones really driving the business. And then this middle 60% is looking around saying, what do I do? How do I turn? And that's where there's so much dormant potential, because if you can imagine a business, imagine if you could take the expense of the bottom 20% and just cut it off, right? You just remove that 20% and all the expenses, time, energy, and effort. And instead, now focus all that time, which in many cases might be 60 to 80% of a sales leader's time. Imagine if you could invest that time all in to just that middle 60%. Now those people are going to be better at their craft. They're going to have a better mindset. They're going to go from those maybe C players in some cases to B, and B to A. And now all of a sudden your top 20% has even a different makeup because of spending that time.
Yeah. Is it fair to say that 60%, those C-level players, are the most expensive? And part of the reason they're the most expensive is because they have the most potential. But the other half that we overlook is that those are the people who get very comfortable, and they tend to stick around for a long period of time. So if they're going to be comfortable and loyal, you might as well coach them up. Is that fair?
That's absolutely right. Right. If you look at any team, whether it be sports, whether it be business or whatever, right? You have to have all different types, right?
Yeah.
And so that mid-level group, they often have the reason, to your point, the reason they often are the most expensive is exactly for the reasons you're saying. It's because they tend to be there, they tend to be productive. Well, if they're there and they're productive, they also tend to have the biggest gap between their current production and their potential production. And that's why they often become the most expensive, because you're losing so much more potential from them than frankly what you are in any other category.
And I would say this too, as a kind of final thought is, let me be clear that we're not trying to take all of the C players and make them A players. That's
Mhm.
not always possible or plausible. However, if we can take a C minus player and turn them into a C plus player, that's typically someone worth keeping around. And so often, I do think that there's a population of that group. It could be 20, it could be 25% that are capable of being a B plus, or even an A minus level player. It
Mhm.
it could be coaching, it could be resources, it could be a lot of things. But if you spend the time, you're going to figure that out, and I think it's going to make a massive impact on your bottom line.